One of the most dangerous lies we often tell ourselves is this: they didn't mean to hurt me, that it was an accident, a moment of weakness, a slip of the tongue. But deep down, you know better. There's a vast difference between someone who makes a mistake and someone who makes a move, between ignorance and intent. And you felt the difference, didn't you? They didn't just stumble into your heart and accidentally break your trust. They walked in with eyes wide open. They knew exactly what they were doing when they said those words. They calculated the timing. They measured the weight of each sentence. And still, they chose to wound you. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a mission. And when that truth hits you, it shakes you. Because the one who caused you pain wasn't a stranger. It was someone you trusted, someone you prayed for, someone you defended, someone you would have given anything for. And yet, with full awareness of the damage they would cause you, were the one they chose to hurt. The enemy doesn't always show up in red with horns. Sometimes it shows up wrapped in loyalty, in love, in family. And when the knife finds your back, it doesn't always feel like betrayal at first. It feels like confusion. Like, how could they? Like maybe, just maybe, you misunderstood, but you just didn't want to believe it. You wanted to believe they were better than that they hadn't changed, that your history with them still meant safety. But history doesn't equal honor. Time doesn't guarantee trust. Some people don't change. They simply get better at hiding who they really are. And when the mask slips, don't pretend you didn't see it. When someone shows you their intent to harm you, don't cover it up with excuses. Don't try to explain it away. That pain you felt was real. The silence you sat in after they left you in pieces, that was real. That ache in your soul that kept you awake at night, questioning your worth, that was real. And they saw it. They saw everything. They saw the damage they did. They saw the way you broke, and they didn't flinch. They didn't check on you. They didn't apologize. And if they did, it wasn't out of remorse. It was because they feared losing their grip, not because they feared they had lost you. Don't let your compassion blind you. Some people aim when they hurt. They wait for the right moment. They study your weaknesses. They learn your patterns. They dig into your past. And when the time is right, they strike. Not by accident, but with precision. And you called it love. You called it friendship. You called it family. But love doesn't aim to break. Real love protects. Real love holds. Real love doesn't twist the knife when you're already on your knees. So many of us keep reopening the door to the very people God already rescued us from. We keep saying, they didn't mean it, or they were just going through something. And yes, grace is beautiful, but grace without wisdom becomes bondage. Forgiveness is a command, but foolishness is a choice. God never asked you to hand your heart back to the one who shattered it. He asked you to guard it, to protect it, to walk in truth. And the truth eyes if they hurt you on purpose, they will do it again. Stop giving second chances to those who used the first to destroy you. Stop believing that loyalty means tolerating pain. Stop measuring love by how much you can endure and start measuring it by how much you are respected, honored, and protected. You deserve relationships that uplift you, not ones that break you and then blame you for bleeding. And yes, walking away may feel like losing. It may feel like letting go of a piece of yourself. But you're not losing. You're learning. You're not letting go of love. You're letting go of a lie. And sometimes, the only way to receive the right thing is to release the wrong one. Don't water down your pain just to keep someone around. Don't minimize what they did just because you fear being alone. God doesn't ask you to lie to yourself in order to love someone else. If they hurt you intentionally, that's not love. That's manipulation. That's control. That's darkness wearing a mask of light. And it's time to expose it, not to shame them, not to get even, but to set yourself free. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful gifts God gives, not just for others, but for yourself. When you forgive, you release the poison. You lay down the weight. You break the chains that bind you to bitterness. But let's be clear, forgiveness is not the same thing as access. Forgiving someone doesn't mean giving them the key to your peace again. We've been told so often to forgive. We sometimes forget to be wise. We think that to truly forgive someone, we have to let them back in, that we must pretend nothing happened, that we must restore the same closeness, the same trust, the same open door they once had. But that's not forgiveness. That's forgetfulness. And there is a difference. God calls us to forgive. Yes, but He never calls us to be fools. He never said, let the wolf back into the sheepfold just because you prayed for him. There are people you've forgiven in your heart, but they are not meant to walk with you into your next chapter. They were part of your wilderness, not your promised land. Just because you let go of the grudge doesn't mean you have to grab their hand again. Some of us are exhausting our souls trying to love people back into decency. We think that if we forgive enough, pray enough, stay long enough, they'll change. But sometimes, distance is the very thing God uses to protect us. Sometimes, separation is His mercy. And if you keep giving access to those He's trying to remove, you're not walking in forgiveness. You're walking in disobedience. Forgiveness says, I release you. It also says, I choose to protect the peace God gave me. That peace came at a price. You cried for it. You fought for it. You had to crawl out of dark places just to feel stillness again. So why hand it back to someone who never valued it the first time? Letting someone back in just because you've forgiven Themis, like handing a thief the keys to your house simply because you prayed about the last robbery. That's not healing, that's self-sabotage. Some people aren't sorry they hurt you, they're sorry they lost access to you. They don't miss you because they love you. They miss you because you were easy to use. You were always there, always kind, always forgiving, and they counted on that. They took your grace for weakness. They took your patience as permission. And now that you've found your strength, now that you're seeing clearly, they want back in, but not to love you. Sometimes letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the clarity to no longer walk back into a cycle that nearly destroyed you. After all the pain, you begin to realize that forgiveness doesn't have to mean restoration. You can pray for someone from a distance. You can wish them well without welcoming them back into your life. You can carry love in your heart without carrying their weight in your world. God isn't judging you by who you allow in. He's watching how well you protect what He's healed. People may ask, but didn't you forgive them? And your answer can be simple, yes, but I've learned not to trust them again. That's not bitterness, it's clarity. That's not vengeance, it's wisdom. The same God who told you to forgive also commanded you to guard your heart. And how can you guard what you keep giving to those who only know how to break it? The world might say forgiveness means reunion, that it means everything should go back to how it used to be. But you know better. Forgiveness is between you and God. Access is between you and discernment. And if God has closed a door, don't prop it back open out of guilt. He knows what you don't. He saw what they said behind your back. He heard the intentions they never voiced. He knew the damage they planned while smiling at you. Sometimes His protection feels like isolation. Sometimes His mercy comes disguised as distance. But trust me, that distance is deliverance in disguise. You don't owe anyone access just because you've forgiven them. That's not pridate's preservation. It's honoring what God has restored inside you. Bless them, release them, pray for them. But stop giving front row seats to people who cheered when you fell. Stop handing the pen to those who already tried to erase your story. They didn't hurt you by accident. It was intentional. They studied your kindness. They listened when you opened your heart. They watched what made you light up, what made you go silent, what made you trust. And with all that knowledge, they chose to wound you. That's why it hurts so deeply. Not just the act, but the awareness behind it. They knew you. They knew the battles you were already fighting, the pain you were still healing from. They knew your vulnerable moments, and instead of covering you, they used it all against you. That's not immaturity. That's intention. And it's okay to admit that. It's okay to call it what it was. We've been trained to soften the blow for others, even while we're still bleeding. We say things like, they were going through something, or maybe I overreacted, or they didn't mean it. But listen, when someone wounds you with full knowledge of your heart, that's not love, that's a weapon. Some of you gave your loyalty to people who only wanted leverage. You shared your secrets with those who saw them as ammunition. You spoke your dreams to people who silently hoped you'd fail. You thought they were listening because they cared, but they were listening out of strategy. They weren't trying to get close to your heart. They were searching for cracks so they could break you where it would hurt the most. But hear me, clearly you are not foolish for trusting. You are not weak for loving. You are not naive because you believe the best in them. That is not your guilt to carry. The darkness they carried in their hearts is not your burden to bear. What they did was a reflection of them, not of you. You were honest, you were pure, you were sincere, and that's nothing to apologize for. That's something to thank God for, that your heart was still open enough to care, that you were still willing to give love a chance. Yes, it was misused. Yes, it was taken for granted. But your heart was never the problem, theirs was. Some people know exactly what they're doing. They bait you with affection. They cover their intentions with charm. They make promises with no plans to keep them. And once your guard is down, they strike. That's why it's so confusing. Because everything seemed so real. And maybe some of it was, but the pain that wasn't spontaneous, that was selected, that was calculated. And that's why it's so hard to forget. But listen careful, God saw it, even when you didn't. He saw the jealousy. He saw the manipulation. He saw how they used your goodness against you. And He allowed it all to come to light, not to break you, but to set you free. Because sometimes it takes pain to wake you up. Sometimes betrayal is the only thing that finally opens your eyes. You thought you were in a safe place, but it was a setup. You thought they had your back, but they were just waiting for the right moment to twist the knife. That's not just wrong, that's evil. And yet, you survived. You're still here. And now, you see clearly. You see who they are. You see what they were doing. And more importantly, you see what God was protecting you from. The enemy rarely strikes randomly. He uses the people closest to you, the ones you trusted, because betrayal only works from the inside. But thank God that what was meant to destroy you failed. What was meant to crush you awakened you. What was meant to break you built something unshakable inside you. Maybe they thought you wouldn't recover. Maybe they thought their silence would shatter your self-worth. Maybe they thought you'd keep hoping, keep begging, keep waiting for them to come back. But you didn't. You're still standing. You're still growing. And now, you know better. If this speaks to your soul, don't forget to subscribe to Divine Strength Daily for more truth, hope, and emotional healing. In the next part, we'll dive even deeper where strength rises from the ashes and peace becomes your permanent ground. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away, not in anger, not in revenge, but with clarity, with peace, because you finally see the truth. You've been here before, haven't you? Giving chances to people who only know how to take. holding space for those who never honored yours, hoping that if you just love them hard enough, long enough, they'll finally see your worth. But they didn't, and they won't, because you were never the problem. You don't have to keep showing up in places where you're merely tolerated but never truly valued. There's a quiet strength in stepping away the world rarely understands. It takes courage to say, no more. It takes deep obedience to the voice of God. It takes a heart that's been broken enough times to finally say, not like this. See, the enemy would love nothing more than to keep you trapped in a vicious cycle. A cycle of pain, of empty apologies with no real change, of hollow promises that were never meant to be kept. He wants you to think staying is noble, that keeping the peace even at the cost of your own peace is what love is supposed to look like. But real love doesn't confuse. Real love doesn't crush. Real love doesn't make you question your worth. Love, true love builds. It protects. It brings clarity, not chaos. And sometimes love for yourself and reverence for God's calling on your life means turning your back on those who kept you small, who only showed up to drain you, who feared what you become the moment you stopped depending on their approval. They called you sensitive when you spoke up, selfish when you set a boundary, but they never spoke about what they did behind closed doors. And yet you stayed, hoping your heart would finally be seen, believing that your loyalty would somehow change them, thinking that if you just gave more, prayed more, endured more, they'd become who you needed. But friend, there comes a time when God shows you healing isn't in staying, it's in walking away. Walking away doesn't mean you're bitter. It means you've grown. It means you've seen enough. It means you're done sitting at a table where God never even placed your chair. You're done begging to be valued by someone who was supposed to protect your heart and chose to break it instead. Of course it hurts. Of course there's grief. You'll mourn what you thought it could have been. You'll feel the weight of all that love you poured out. But that ache, it's temporary. It's the sting of release, and on the other side of that pain is peace. The kind of peace that lets you breathe again without walking on eggshells. The kind of peace that rises when you finally obey that still, small whisper saying, it's time. Some of you have been praying for peace, but ignoring the signs. God has been showing you their fruit. He's been exposing what's hidden. He's allowed things to fall apart, not to punish you, but to deliver you. And every time you patch it back together, every time you excuse their behavior, every time you pretend the betrayal didn't happen, you're delaying your own breakthrough. You've been crying over people God already removed his hand from, begging for restoration in a chapter heaven has already closed. But not every door is meant to reopen. Not every relationship is meant to be revived. Sometimes the true blessing is found in the goodbye. Sometimes the healing doesn't begin until the final page turns. And please, don't let guilt convince you to stay where your soul is quietly dying. You don't owe anyone your sanity. You don't owe anyone access to the healed version of you if they helped break the old one. If they couldn't love you at your most giving, they don't deserve you now that you've found your strength. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the silence they created. Let your absence speak what words never could, because sometimes your peace is the loudest message of all. And trust this, the same God who walked with you through the valley is walking with you now, straight into freedom. You are not walking away alone. You are walking with purpose, with protection, toward a promise that can only be fulfilled away from the pain. Forgiveness and access. Don't confuse the two. We often do, especially when our hearts are still tender. You can forgive someone fully. You can pray for them, release the bitterness, wish them well, and still recognize they no longer belong in your life. That's not a lack of forgiveness. That's wisdom. That's discernment. That's walking in maturity with God. You see, some of us have been taught that forgiveness means pretending nothing happened, reopening the door, letting them back in like nothing ever changed. But forgiveness with God doesn't mean forgetting, it means releasing the offense, the pain, the weight of it all. But it also means guarding your peace. Because here's the truth. Some people only apologize to regain access, not because they've changed, but because they see you have. They sense the shift. They feel the silence. They see the strength that's rising in your absence, and they want back in, not to honor your healing, but to interrupt it. That's where discernment must become your shield. That's when you must remember. Forgiveness is free, but access is earned. You don't owe re-entry to someone who shattered your soul. Forgiveness is a gift you give for your own freedom. Access? That's a boundary you set for your protection. And if someone wounded you intentionally, if they broke your trust and twisted your love, then giving them another chance is not your responsibility. Yes, God calls us to forgive, but He never told us to leave the gate open. If this message is giving you strength, insight, or comfort, don't leave without subscribing to Divine Strength Daily. Let truth guide your heart and healing restore your steps. Stay tuned, our next part brings it all together, and you won't want to miss it. Some people walk into your life not to build, but to burn what they never helped create. And if you keep handing them the matches, don't be surprised when they set everything you love on fire. Forgiveness doesn't mean giving them access again. You can pray for someone from afar. You can bless them without letting them back in. You can carry love in your heart without carrying their weight in your life. Because some people weren't just a painful season, they were a warning. And the lesson they brought was meant to guard your future. If you let them return without repentance, without fruit, without true change, what you're doing isn't forgiveness anymore. It's betrayal. Forgiveness says, I no longer hate you. Wisdom says, I no longer trust you. And both of those can live peacefully in a healed heart. Grace doesn't mean foolishness. You can be full of mercy and still guard your peace. You can be kind and still say no. Because some people know how to say all the right words, but their heart remains unchanged. What they're doing isn't repenting, it's rehearsing. They're not transforming, they're manipulating. They want a reaction. They want to reopen the same door they once slammed shut, just so they can finish what they started. If you let them back in too soon, if you confuse emotional pressure for spiritual growth, you'll fall into the very same pit you just climbed out of. That's why God calls us to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. It is possible to be loving and discerning, kind but cautious, merciful but guarded. That's not bitterness. That's being a good steward of your soul. The enemy wants you to confuse forgiveness with passivity. But the Holy Spirit teaches you to forgive without surrendering the boundaries that keep you safe. Just because someone is sorry doesn't mean they're safe. Look for the fruit. Look for humility. Look for transformation. Not just words, not just tears, not guilt, but consistent, lasting change. Until that change appears, they can stay outside the gate of your peace, even as you lift them up in prayer. Because forgiveness is about freeing yourself from what they did. But access? That's about protecting what God is doing in you now. God is bringing the right voices, the right people, the right healing into your life, not to drain your soul, but to nourish it. So when they come knocking again on the very door they once slammed in your face, you don't have to answer. You don't have to explain. You don't have to justify your peace. You can smile with grace, forgive with truth, and simply say, not this time. God is doing something new in me. And there is no shame in that. There's no guilt in guarding your growth. If they truly cared, they would never have hurt you in the first place. If they truly respected you, they wouldn't ask to return through a door they once set on fire. There is power in letting a knot because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Some people cannot walk with you into where God is leading. Their chapter in your life has ended. Forcing them into your next one is like shoving broken glass into a new window frame. It might look like it fits, but it's dangerous and won't last under pressure. Eventually, you stop hoping they'll see your worth. You start living like you already know it. That's not pride. That's healing. That's not arrogance. That's wisdom. You stop putting your purpose on pause just to prove something to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You stop reaching for someone who had every chance and still chose to break you. At some point, you stop calling. You stop waiting for a message. You stop hoping for an apology that's never coming. And you look up and say, Lord, I trust you with what's behind me, and I'm ready for what's ahead. Yes, letting go hurts. It stings to release someone you once prayed for. But not everyone is assigned to your future. Some people were only meant to walk with you for a season, and when their time is up, your job isn't to carry them into your calling. Your job is to obey even when it feels like loss. The enemy wants to keep you stuck replaying memories, overanalyzing silence, rereading texts that never came. Why? Because if he can keep your heart trapped in yesterday, you'll miss the blessing that's standing in front of you today. But God is calling you higher. And sometimes elevation requires separation. You can't climb while dragging dead weight. You can't soar while clinging to those who chose to stay grounded. Letting go isn't just about walking away, it's about making room. Room for peace. Room for purpose. Room for the right people, those sent by God, not confusion. You gave them grace. You gave them time. You gave them loyalty. And they gave you wounds, silence, lies, disappointment. At some point, love means closing the door not because you're cruel, but because you've finally chosen to be kind to yourself. It's not weakness to walk away from dysfunction, it's wisdom. It's not unforgiveness to protect your heart, it's discernment. You can't heal where you were broken. You can't grow in the soil that tried to choke your soul. You can't keep inviting people who only showed up to steal your joy. God doesn't need you to prove your worth to those who couldn't see it. He doesn't need you to chase the ones who chose to walk away. What he needs is your heart, surrendered, open, trusting. Now let me tell you this, just because they let you go doesn't mean you weren't worthy. Just because they left doesn't mean you weren't enough. Their betrayal doesn't change your identity. Their silence doesn't cancel your calling. You are still chosen, still anointed, still destined for more. Letting go is not the end, it's the beginning. It's the moment you stop surviving and start living. It's the hour you reclaim your peace. The second you look in the mirror and remember who you are in Christ. And from that moment on, you never settle again. Not for half love, not for temporary loyalty, not for spaces that leave you empty. You walk forward, maybe scarred, maybe shaky, but free. Because when God heals you, he doesn't just patch up the wounds. He gives you a new heart, a new strength, a new joy. And when he restores, it's not just for what was lost, it's for what's still to come. So leave the door closed. Let the silence remain. Let the past stay in the past. And don't you dare reopen what God has already shut. If this message stirred something in, you subscribe now to Divine Strength Daily. Join us as we walk in truth, grow in faith, and live in freedom. You're not alone. The healing starts now.